Dan Layden,
Present.
David Montoya, he's here. Joseph Lopez,
Present.
Mr. Stewart,
Present for duty, ma'am.
Debbie Strongen,
Here.
Debbie Dodge,
Present.
Michael Wismer, no. Elena Giacchi,
Here.
everybody present and accounted for except for 2 members.
With business. Obviously, we have some very honored guests here, and so we don't want to take a whole lot of time.
Be
I
visitors, Dave.
I had a brief opportunity to review March 10 meeting minutes. I don't know if you have some time with a motion on the minute so that you can. Ready, I'll read it.
Would you like to see it? If you're, well, when you're done.
Your approval and we'll table that item. Obviously, we're not on the team, so I don't expect that we have public comment. But again, we're graced by members of the sheriff's office, and so I want to recognize each of them and allow them to have a comment. So I don't know if you all have had an opportunity to orchestrate, but Shall we start with?
I can get, yeah. Well, we'll introduce her. It's most of you know her.
Before they start, David Wismer is on.
Okay,
Wait, Michael was.
Mike Wismer. David Montoya isn't on.
well, we're lucky to have Diane back among us. Acid.
Hello again, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for the golf clap. No, I'm glad to be here. This is something I've been hoping to do for a while, and I hope to look at some training and the way the department does myself.
What you're gonna be doing?
Yeah, so I'll lead into that. Okay, so my position right now is behavioral health compliance manager. I'm going to be looking at the programs too, like CIT training, kind of like the internal workings of the department. Definitely collaborations. I can see that my previous experience with APD collaborations and joint partnerships and networking with community partners are crucial. And that's something I'd like to build within crisis intervention, and then just, you know, the department in itself. Those things are very important because to train better, we should take in community partnership, because then we can get training within, and also by using the stakeholders. I also want to work on some diversion programs. We do have law enforcement assisted diversion, as you know. So that's something I'd like to look at, because I did create that with the model that was built in Seattle, but I did create that within APD. And so they adapted it at BCSO, and I'm looking at data now to see how well our officers are diverting, you know, instead of arresting. So pre-arrest diversion programs are important. It's my first week, so bear with me, but it's a huge learning curve, and everyone at the county's been so welcoming. It's really nice to see everyone working together. It's really like all the divisions and units, and yeah, that's really it. Am I missing anything? Yes.
What is your job title?
It's behavioral health program and compliance manager.
Okay.
So
Actually, Jim, you knew that she was on the board
No,
previously.
no, kind of, sort of.
I kind of jokingly said it's good to have her back, but.
Yeah.
But you're at the
For
sheriff.
those who are new,
Yeah.
go back and about your experience here.
Yeah, sure. So, when I heard
She was on the fifth board
about
with
the, posting that this board was gonna be created, I had just retired from the Albuquerque Police Department as a sergeant in crisis intervention. And I've been a longtime board member for the National Alliance on Mental Illness and, also an interim president because our board president had to leave for personal reasons. So, retiring young, I was still wanting to stay very stimulated. I think some of you can, relate to that. And I saw the posting for this board. And at the time, you had to be vetted by the county commissioner. So, my local county commissioner had vetted me. We met on Zoom and then he recommended me to the board. And I was one of the first members. So I stayed on the board for about a year. And then interim president came my way from the National Alliance, and it's a huge role. So I kindly stepped away and to focus on that. And now I'm here.
So I was a NAMI board member in Texas.
Okay, that's excellent. So an affiliate, yeah.
Yeah, so,
That's actually where I just came from. So I was just at the Gateway
congratulations. You said
Center.
you're in Texas.
No, I just came from the Gateway Center and
Oh,
they have their renovation because now they're partnered. So now they're gonna be next to Haven, Behavioral Health, so it's really gonna be good wraparound services.
One more question.
All of that $1 million that they put into it was fun.
One question and I'll stop. Are you responsible for training?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, that's definitely something I'm gonna look at. My previous experience with APD is curriculum, just looking at what that looks like. That's why it's important to involve community partners, because we bear in mind first person language and stigma, and which really looking at diversion programs. So we did work a lot with the academy to make sure our curriculum was up to date. So I do have some knowledge in that, and that's something I'd like to look at.
Do you have an email we can contact you if we?
I do. So it's ddosal@burnco.gov. I did have to start learning to use Burnco and not CBQ. Anything else? Thanks for having me. I really do want to start showing up to these meetings more because I found it to be completely beneficial. And I know that it's important to have someone in the mental health spectrum to kind of answer some of the questions that might arise and that have arisen in past meetings. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
David Montoya is now present also
He's online.
on Teams.
Oh. Yeah, looking around.
He's in the lab.
We're certainly pleased to have
Holly.
senior multi-partner.
Yes, sir. Well, happy to be here again. Sorry I missed last month. I was telling the chair that I was out with my daughter. She plays ice hockey. And it should be over, but she keeps advancing, so she keeps prolonging our season. So, but we're excited to be back and we are very excited to have Diane. So I worked with Diane at APD for a number of years with CNT and CIT and all those things. And I value her experience and her education and her training value. She's going to bring a lot to our department and just her temperament and her personality. And she is just as hardworking as the rest of us. So I don't imagine that we're gonna slow down any. Everything that she brings is kind of the last piece of the puzzle, just for this particular goal with the sheriff. So we were really looking forward to adding her, and I know that you worked very hard to get her position in. Ms. Layden had contacted me and we were discussing the BHI Behavioral Health Initiative and how they have some funds sometimes to help with these projects, and we were working on that. And we did contact them, and they are also going to be helping us with some other behavioral health case managers for our caseworkers and some victims advocates. So that's our next initiative. We put in for grants for these positions, as well as collaborating efforts with the county, which they are supporting. So we're really looking forward to that and giving Diane more things to focus on and work with. So we're expanding that area of the department. I did just get back from Arizona, from the Axon conference. the Accelerate. So we're looking at the body cameras and we're doing a little bit more investigation onto that. I was very pleased with what I saw.
Excellent.
Their technology is phenomenal. Like their opening ceremony, I was telling some of the guys, I felt like Tony Stark was gonna come out in a second. Because it was just that over the top. And some of the minds of listening to these people, I could never be that intelligent. They were just so impressive. All of the engineering teams that they have involved, the think tanks that they do, and all the information, and it's 100% customer driven. So whatever people need and that they want for their companies, they really focus around that, and then they just make it 10 times bigger. So we're waiting now to see if we can afford them. We're waiting on some contract information to see what we can do to negotiate that. We are still looking at some of the other systems, just to be fair and make sure that we give everybody the fair chance and opportunity to perhaps move up for utility as well. They've stepped up and they've tried to make some improvements on the product that we already have and in the contract that we're already with. We're trying to be fiscally responsible to make sure that, can we stick with the contract that we already have? Or is this something that we're gonna need to move forward from? So we're still in the investigative phase, but this conference was very informative and I'm glad that we had the opportunity to attend.
There are some things that we've discussed in the past around body cameras and victims and how we protect kind of the anonymity of victims as well as some of the intimate details if they're in a sexual violence case or something like that. And we would love to meet with you and just kind of express that type of information and what our concerns, as well as, our hopes would be to be able to
Yeah,
do
sure.
something like that.
Right.
So,
Requirements, but also being sensitive. to
right,
other
exactly.
people. They actually do, and I'm not a sales rep for Axon, but I'll just tell you some of the stuff that they had. That was part of it. They do have a really good redaction program.
Right.
Where you can redact, you select an item, whether it be a face, a piece of paper, an identification, a license plate. You select it and then it will redact it throughout the video.
Yeah.
It has the beeping option, so
Mm.
maybe we don't want to hear the voice or certain
Mhm.
things being said. So we're looking at not just a camera.
Mhm.
We want to see the software and the potential for the intelligence that comes with that system. So we're excited to see some of those things because even for our IPR requests,
Yeah.
how is it going to affect the administration of the people who are going to have to work with this system moving forward?
Mhm.
And we are involving all of the partners within the county and our department
Mhm.
to make sure from the very beginning that they're involved in these demonstrations and in the implements of those, and especially our tech people. Can we support this kind of system with the infrastructure that we have? So we're really trying to do all of our homework and making sure that all of the elements of not only the camera and meeting the mandate, but how does that look down the road and how does it affect the officers' use of it and the public's use of that as well?
Any questions or comments?
I just wondered, is the funding that you need for that coming completely from the county or are there other funding sources, either from the state or from individual legislators for the state?
Right, and that's what we're looking for.
Mhm.
There was actually a class within the conference for grants specific to that, so we'll be looking at those. We also have some funding that remains in the current contract that we have. Some of the things that we asked from Axon was that, maybe they potentially buy out some of our contract so that it's not a financial burden on the county. There's always like some upgrade costs that come with different things, but this one, we're looking at a 5-year and a 10-year. So that we can lock in a rate so that we can appropriate for as far out as we can. And they would also then do updates, the most current technology. Every 30 months, we would get the most current technology and they would replace the system in its entirety. So all of the body cameras, all the vehicle cameras, and then every 5 years, we would get the most current technology for the taser. So it's what we're looking for are body cameras, vehicle cameras, and the taser. So we're looking for kind of a bundle package. And one thing that I appreciated from their company is they look for us to succeed. In all of the companies that we spoke to and all of the different departments that we met with, they never said, we like it, but it's too expensive. Or like, that was never seemed to really be an issue. And in talking with the financial people there at the end, they want to make sure that we succeed. And how does that look for us? So they really listen to us and some of the things that we have, that we may have issues with the current contract to make sure that we're not double burdening our current tax on our revenue.
And do they have policies, kind of best practices, policies, protocols and procedures for those who institute their cameras, what they would recommend? And are we taking a look at also BCSO's policies, procedures and protocols so that it reflects the best of,
Yes, ma'am.
your piece? as
Yeah, and
well?
part of that and going to these conferences is Axon doesn't necessarily, or any company doesn't necessarily tell you how to use it or when to
Mhm.
use it. They tell you the ability of the product. And then it would be up to us within our policies
Right.
and our community to decide how best that fits us. So we are looking, and in some of the conversations with other departments around, we had meetings with people of our locality, like Arizona, California, Colorado. So they even put us in groups with, like community environments so that we could discuss with them. And that's where we kind of get some of the best practices stuff. We're also looking to do different types of audits of videos, and how does that look for our department?
I want to speak about the article that appeared in the Guardian about mental health. I made some materials. I'd like to just give them to both of you. I went through the journal to see what they had on the behavioral health teams.
Sure.
And so I'll give you these. There was an editorial on March 31st, which I'll mention later, but here you may have.
Thank you.
Diane. Okay. The city county crisis teams were first mentioned from what I found in 2017. And the first ones appeared in 2018. And the last reference I found was in June of 2021. So this is just background.
Thank you for the research.
Does that obviate the need for your presentation as well, or is that just,
Just, I did this last night.
okay, thank you. And we're thrilled to have Under Sheriff Perino.
Carreño or Joano or
Okay,
however comes out.
well, welcome. Welcome your comments.
Before I make any comment, because this is my first time, so I appreciate you all having this and welcoming me. A little bit of background for me, because I think it's probably, I don't think relevant, but I'm a very personable guy. But obviously, if you haven't figured out by now, I'm not from here. I was born in Chile. I left Chile when I was 21 years old, lived in Mexico for about 2.5 years, and then I moved here to Albuquerque. I don't have any more family here. It's just me, my wife, and our son. I went to the academy. My background, well, I moved to the United States. I was a dishwasher for a couple of years. Then I became a pizza delivery driver. Which,
Much beyond the 21 years. Chile, all this.
I was a professional soccer player in Chile. So that was my background. But then I moved here. Didn't know how to speak English at all when I moved to the United States. I was very blessed that I had a manager at Pizza Hut who told me I will not speak Spanish to you, even though he was from Mexico. He said, because you need to learn how to speak English. So he would just speak English, broken English in between him and mine, and we'll figure it out. The conversations were funny. Then I went into banking. So that's where my most recent background before I became a deputy was in banking. Worked for Bank of the West, Bank of America, First Community Bank. And while I was at Bank of the West, I was the Southwest ambassador for any acquisition that Bank of the West will do when they will purchase other banks, like smaller banks, and they'll have to convert into their systems and do audits. So that was my background with Bank of the West. Moved to First Community Bank. And I was their lead new business, big whale kind of guy. So my job was to basically just go and find the new customers to bring more money to the bank and to keep everybody happy, like taking them out to lunch. So that was
So I
my,
like to do this.
yes, so that was my job. And then it came to me that if this country was welcoming me to live here, it was my duty to provide a service back to the country. So I went and took the ASVAB test, if that was called, the military. So I took that test to go into the Marines. My wife at the time got pregnant. So I decided to not do it and wait until, because I didn't want to miss the first couple of years of my son. I was still working at the bank. One of my two assistants that I had at the bank, her husband had just graduated from APD. Had like a week on after field training, and he was solo, so he was like, dude, let's go on a ride along, like the movie. Now it's like, let's go on a ride along. So I went on a ride along. His first call was in the southeast area. It was two subjects fighting with samurai swords on the street. Now it's like, there's no way that there's people with samurai swords in the street. We showed up and there was two people fighting with samurai swords. And that was like, that got me hooked. I was like, this is definitely what I want to do. And I was like, well, there's still a service to this country, so I'm not gonna go to the military, and I'm gonna go to become a police officer. Went with APD, didn't work out. During the application process, because I wasn't a citizen yet. And I went to BCSO, worked out, became a deputy, graduated academy in 2019. I spent 9.5 years in DWI. So when it comes to DWI enforcement, I know it all, I did it all. But then I decided that I wanted to get some sleep. So I tested for sergeant, and I was a field sergeant for a year. Then I was the air unit sergeant the year before a helicopter crash. So I left the unit 2 months before the helicopter crash. If I would have not left, that would have been me in the helicopter. And then I was just blessed with being asked to be one of Sheriff Allen's undersheriffs. So my most recent experience, I've been in the field basically my whole career. I was a sergeant 3 months ago. I haven't been accustomed to being detached from the actual people working, like the deputies and the detectives. Which I think that as an executive staff, it gives us a huge advantage from previous administrations, not just the previous one, but any previous one that I've worked under. Having me as I was just sergeant in the field 3 months ago, having Major Anderson, having Diane, having Under Sheriff Williamson, who was the traffic and DLBA lieutenant, also 3 months ago, still stopping cars, responding to call for service. So I think that we're the advantage that the team that Sheriff Allen has put together, we're very close to the day-to-day operations of what people actually do. And more so than having to learn and getting ourselves acquainted with the day-to-day operations is us getting acquainted with the administrative side of it, which everybody's very strong at it because on the positions that we were, like Diane has plenty of experience administratively and everything that has to do with CAT and CNT. Major Anderson knows everybody and everything there is to know about the CID side and everything that has to do with the feds and all that I never was exposed to. Under Sheriff Williamson has the experience of being a lot on the administrative side throughout his career, and I've just been in the field other than being in charge of the helicopter unit. So we're very excited. I think that all of you have noticed by now we're very normal people. We're not completely detached from reality. We're very open, and I was having a brief conversation with you where I said that so we don't understand and the entire and the culture that we're trying to push. We don't have anything to hide. I don't know. We don't have that need. There's nothing that we're hiding. There's things that maybe we cannot release because might be sensitive to a case that is being worked on. But other than that, like we're very open. We're at the end of the day, we're public servants and we work for the people.
Right.
And if people ask us a question, it is our duty and our responsibility to respond to that. And even if it's something that we cannot expand fully because there might be some sensitive information, that doesn't mean that we cannot answer a question. And we're holding all this information very tight, like it belongs to us and doesn't belong to anybody else. So when it comes to this relationship with all of you, we're very open and we see it differently. I think that's what the previous experience you all had.
Mhm.
We're very open. You guys are a channel for the community and you all being appointed to this to serve a purpose. And it's only in our best interest to have that relationship and get the most out of that purpose that you all have. So we're very glad to be part of this. We're very committed. And is the directive from the sheriff that we will be in attendance at every meeting. So one of us will be there if we can all be here. The major just came back from Phoenix and she was like, it's SOARB meeting today. I'll be at SOARB. So it's not that we're hiding or anything, that we're here. Any question that you all may have, and if we don't have an answer, we'll tell you we don't have an answer right now, but we'll find out if it's something that you all need to know and that we don't know. But other than that, I'm open for any questions any of you have. I'm in charge of the operational side of the house. Under Sheriff Wellington is in charge of the administrative side, the academy, fleet, purchasing, training, all of that, and I'm in charge of all the cup related stuff.
Mhm.
That's always, let's see if we put it. I'm in charge of field services division and CAD, which is our criminal investigation division. So uniform patrol and detectives. I'm also overseeing our community engagement team. So everything that we do with the community funnels through me. I coordinate all of that and a bunch of other projects, whatever the sheriff throws at us. Basically that. Exactly. Yeah, but it's always something new. We all work very well together. I don't know, we keep each other very tight on our relationship too.
I know you and I had just talked very briefly outside about, whether we could somehow partner with this board and the sheriff's office to publicize the availability of this board as a resource for the community. And I'm just kind of throwing that out there as a suggestion that, it's something to think about how that might work.
Yeah, and as I said, I don't see any issue about it, and it's something that will be, again, you're all here for a reason. So if expanding the reach that you all have by getting comments, believe me, we're not hiding from comments. So if people want to give their input and comments, some might be like completely from somebody who doesn't really know, and that's the other part of it, that this relationship is only beneficial because it also allows us to explain to you all what our operations are and how does it work. So when you all might get a comment, you'll be like, that's not, they can do that. And there is a reason for it. But we don't have any issues with being open to comments. We're not hiding from it. If people don't like something that we do, I don't have a problem explaining why we do it this way and not the way that they're asking, because it is very hard to go, like, if I'm not a doctor, but if I go watch a surgery and the doctor is doing something and I'm like, that does not look right. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I can certainly, if it is in the interest of the public, for me to go ask the question and be like, why are you doing this? I'm pretty sure the doctor is going to tell me this is why I'm doing this and not this. The same thing with us. We don't have a problem explaining. And again, we're public servants. We get paid by taxpayers. So we have to be held accountable and be wide open to answer any questions.
I think the fact is that people almost never make comments that are to praise anybody. I mean, in a job, the most significant thing you can do is to mess up usually, and you get a critique. But I'd like to welcome comments from the community that are both positive and constructively negative. And we've been, talking about ways to try to have outreach to the community. And I don't think we've had a lot of success. We've had a few issues that have been very well publicized, thanks to Esteban. But otherwise, I think partly because we started during COVID, and so our reach was very limited through Zoom. But, we're certainly open to any suggestions of either meetings we could do jointly or, specific areas that we might want to reach out to. So,
Yeah, we'll definitely look into it. And as I said, I don't know if there is any legal issue,
right.
but we don't know if we didn't ask. So I'll definitely ask.
And we've certainly, and we'll talk about that later on in this piece about, the kind of community collaborative meetings that we would like to have at some point in the next year, and developing that along with the sheriffs and just opening that up to what kind of comments do you have? What are your feelings? How can we do things better? How we can do things better, as well as how the sheriff's office could do things differently that might open itself up to a more collaborative nature. So, yeah.
It's like our board across the country. There are other boards like our board. I can send you the links if you're interested. So this is happening. Local law enforcement advisory boards have sprung up in other communities. I have 4 links, and there are undoubtedly others. So please don't feel like you're being picked on or.
No, we don't at all. We don't know if really you guys are our link to the community, one of our links to the community, and we would like for people to bring information to you and you bring it to us so that we can sit down and have these conversations and you can be an ally on our behalf to go back and talk to them if that's what they feel more comfortable with, or they can come to us directly. But I think that your success certainly depends on our collaboration together. And so perhaps we can get our PIO, Jamie, she just peeked her head in real quick with Esteban and see what that might look like, and we'll ask council to advise whether or not we can meet in that type of a forum, or how does that look? Maybe we can push something out and you guys can hold a meeting and we can try to encourage the public to come and speak to you specifically, just to get the education out there about who you are and what you do.
And we wouldn't know what we're doing that it might be perceived wrong if we don't have a way to channel that information to us. At the end of the day, iron sharpens iron.
Yeah,
So
we absolutely.
that's what we're gonna give them.
We absolutely want to do that. So it's of no offense whatsoever. It's all investigative for us.
Well, we, again, thank you for being here and welcome your attendance at any point. Our relationship may not always be as rosy as it is right now. And want you to understand that it's not an attack on the person or the institution, but our perception, that sometimes the public doesn't feel welcome in making certain comments. And so a part of our role is to assist that segment of the population as well. In that context, you all have a Twitter account? You have
Our department does, yes.
Yeah, the department.
okay. I haven't heard anything about that one, so.
Must not be a problem then.
So we have 3 platforms. We used to have 4, but we only have 3 now. And Twitter is the one we use, because I used to do PIO stuff I was the Spanish speaker PIO for the department for like 5 years. We use Twitter to push usually updates of road closures, crime scene, somewhere it's more like it's almost like sending a mass text message. That's the way I look at it. And when it comes to stories, those usually go to Facebook and Insta Facebook.
Yeah, you have a great Facebook presence, because I'm friends with you.
We have great PIOs.
Yeah, you have to have young folk on the board because.
Yeah, and those might be places that we could help advertise your existence. Maybe some people
Yeah.
just don't even know that you exist and how does that look.
People really connect to that Facebook,
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, give them an avenue, maybe just give them a link if you guys have an inbox where you take questions, or what does that look like, and whatever type of, maybe a link to whatever type of contact information you want to give them. But you have to be careful with that, because you get what you ask for. Maybe something like that. That might be a platform where we could advertise your existence.
Speaking of Facebook and those types of venues, certainly there's been a couple of things with the Albuquerque Police Department that have shown when a PIO might say something, even though they had protocols in place to kind of prevent that, the chief came out and said, well, it's okay, I don't see anything wrong. Do you all, as the sheriff's department, have protocols and best practices in place that if a officer or someone associated with the department says things that are not part of the best practices, what occurs with that?
So the PIOs work directly at the fifth floor for us.
Mhm.
They're not in some isolated location where they can do whatever they do. Every single time if we post something on Facebook, we don't reply, we don't get on Twitter battles with anybody. That's not our job. We don't try to justify anything either. We do it from our perspective, is for us to communicate and let the community know what we're doing. If there is any type of events. If they have a questions about a road closure, how long this is gonna be closed, then our PIOs reply and they say, we don't have an estimated time to open it. But when it comes to, because we did have an issue about 5 years ago. Or we looked at it, the sheriff himself gets alerts on his phone when anything is posted. Anything that is posted from the PIOs, it gets reviewed by both undersheriffs. So nothing goes out that is not approved by us. And again, they work in the office, the PIO is in the office right next to home. So anything that goes through them, it goes through us as well. So we manage that very, very, very closely as much as the sheriff supervises us. The reason for it is, and it's gonna lead me to the password thing. About 5 years ago, this administration decided that it would be a great idea to issue every lieutenant and above access to their social media so they could post things on the go without having to call the PIO. What happened was a lieutenant retired, disgruntled, and then he goes and starts posting things on our official social media. And I was the PIO, one of the PIOs at the time. We found out about 15 minutes later, so I shut down all social media with our new PIO, our new sworn PIO. We have two PIOs. We have Jamie and Angelina. Angelina is our sworn PIO. She was an intern at the time. So I called her and she shut down all social media and then reissued a password that only at the time the sheriff and the other PIO at the time and under sheriff Rudy Mora had access to. On December 31st last year, we made our PIO shut down all social media, change all passwords, and she was the only one with the password to access. That was Jamie Fuller, the one who came in here now. Obviously, we couldn't give any order before because we were not in office yet, but she did it like December 31st. I think we met with her and she said, okay, I cannot take orders from you yet, but you're gonna have to be my bosses, so I better do it. So she actually did it. So the only people who have access, I don't even have the password for social media. The only two people that have access to our social media is Jamie Fuller and Angelina Navarro. So nothing can get out that is posted that is not approved by us. So we're pretty tight when it comes to the social media. And also because I used to be a PIO, and the Sheriff Williamson was a PIO. So we lived through the whole PIO experience. And the Sheriff Williamson and I were the two that started the social media for the office. So we know pretty well how contentious it can get. But the sheriff is very adamant about what gets posted and needs to be reviewed. We don't have that type of issue whatsoever. We don't condone any of that behavior. That's not the place to do it. Like, well, without getting much into what other departments do, but I don't see the need for it. That's not how we handle social media. The culture that we're pushing through our office is very community oriented. Reason why we have a community engagement team that has grown so much because we didn't think it was going to get so bad, like so crazy with requests. But we started with one person full time, and now we have that same deputy full time, and we have another 7 deputies working part time, who on a daily basis are doing community events. So if we don't work with the community, much like if we don't work with you, we're not going to get any better. So we need to mend that relationship between law enforcement and where all we do is just drive around with license sirens and arrest people and put them in jail. There is more to law enforcement than simply doing that. There is the community aspect of it, the behavioral health aspect of it, there is the technology aspect of it. It's too broad. It's not the 1970s where that's all you do. It's 2023. So that's how we manage. I don't know if that answered your
It
question.
does, thank you.
Very good. Appreciate it. Appreciate your presence and comments, your introduction. And, we'll move on with our meeting agenda. If there are any other questions. Major notes, I invite you to stay. So it's not required. You all are busy folks. We appreciate it.
Was there anything on the agenda that we may need to adjust? I know the last time I was here, there was.
I don't know if it's made the agenda. I know the sheriff addressed for us, the issues and the comments of the deputy in that one investigation. Is that pretty much resolved?
Yeah, I think we.
Yeah, I
got
think we
that.
discussed that.
Yeah,
There was that political conversation, yeah, but I think he addressed it.
Yeah.
I'm the one who addressed that.
okay.
By the direction of the sheriff, he called me like late. He's like, this needs to be addressed. The next morning, that deputy was in my office at 8 in the morning and it got addressed.
Okay.
So how is that now? I know that the reason given at the time was that it could have promoted a better relationship with this person that they wanted to get information from. And I know the sheriff said, doesn't matter, it wasn't appropriate. Is that kind of still the stance?
Yes.
Is that, okay,
And that was what the discipline was.
And of course, we didn't have context as we discussed it, and the sheriff said it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
We made a decision on it, and this was our call. So we appreciate that. As far as I am concerned, it's all for us.
I think the only other thing might be the collaborative meetings that we had talked about, including the sheriff and what we were doing and where we were looking at and those pieces, those are coming up in the bulk of the meeting, so.
I don't mind staying.
Okay.
But before I forget though, the sheriff just got new challenge coins. So that's what Jamie was doing, because I forgot half of them at my office. So
Okay.
brand new.
These are awesome.
He got it.
Very cool.
The gift.
Thank you.
Well, they're okay. For me and Dana, these are under 25, right? No.
I know, so.
I just wanna know. See, I read my code of conduct.
I know.
I read my code of conduct.
How many more members do you have there here?
Two.
We won't play the drinking game behind you.
I'll get it now.
I have some from
Yeah.
drinking.
Cool.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Great.
So having taken a moment to admire our coins. We have, under item 6 old business, update on the March discussion. SOARB code of conduct and listed as speaking. Was there something that we needed to cover over?
Just a quick update. I just wanted to make sure we had discussions in it. I think you brought up last month, and I apologize, I wasn't here in person. The board doesn't have a specific rule prohibiting personal relationships, limiting that communication with others and how that could affect the image of the board. But it's something that probably should be considered if those relationships can lead to hirings or a connection to the county commissioner in that sense. Because I only say this because there's another board that is having these issues in Bernalillo County. It's not really a problem here, but I want this board to be aware of this. There is a code of conduct board, and I guess they do technically have jurisdiction into investigating any issues with this board as well. And that's really I just kind of wanted to tie that little knot at the end of it. But I really don't see any issues, but I just kind of wanted to reiterate, if you all feel there is something, it's better to just let it out and that way there's no question as to whether you guys disclosed it, because the whole board really does make great decisions together.
And my recollection of vice chair's issue was so nuanced that you couldn't possibly, I think your husband has to volunteer and
Well, and I mentioned to JJ that, my husband was a volunteer for, Representative Meredith Dixon, because all the legislators in New Mexico, state, local, whatever, but they have certain discretionary funds that they are allowed to give to to causes they choose. And so one of those causes was actually the enhancement of the helicopter supply at the sheriff's office, and the contact person, my husband was given that particular item to research. So he spoke to Under Sheriff Jareño about that. But again, he wasn't evaluating it. He was just getting information and passing it along. He has not been asked to give an opinion on yes or no on those funds. So.
And I had mentioned my connection of talking to Sheriff Allen originally just as a victim advocate concerned with, the advocacy of what's going on in the department, and as well as things like body cameras before we decided to take this on. But doing those different things as an advocate for, especially underserved communities. So mentioned that as well. So I think hopefully we have as much as we can on the table about our involvement. So.
It helps quite a bit when you do, like these
Yeah.
kind of disclosures help a lot.
so I guess you're saying, Dan, blue sky.
Yes, friendships, longtime relationships, longtime acquaintances, stuff like that.
When in question, go ahead and disclose it.
Yes.
This is David Montoya. I go to the same gym as the sheriff. Does that count?
Yes.
Yes.
No,
I thought you know, private gym.
Only if you squatting.
You just can't be too careful.
Yes.
And that's the reason I mentioned it. There's been in other committees or commissions in the county, there's been accusations made, and I don't want that to happen here. So.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Let me just ask a quick question, like, let's say we want, a member of this board has, goes and has coffee with a member of the sheriff's office. Is that something that's
No, that's
problem in any way?
not
or-
necessarily.
One of my good friends just works for the sheriff's office. I hope that's not true.
Right.
Yeah, that's,
Give us a coin, Daniel. Is that?
see, that's where it gets weird, right? I'm just trying to. I'm just trying to
Right.
protect the board, because there really has been an uptick in other areas of the county where that, for years, the ethics board did nothing.
Right.
And since late last year, they've been very busy. And so I just don't want that to happen here.
It goes in waves.
Yeah, and it's really a hassle for the member that's in that, and I wouldn't watch that on
Yeah.
anyone here.
I think that we should establish a rule that if you go get a beer with another member of the board, that if that member is senior, like the chair, then they buy the beer. That's what I think.
Just as long as 3 of you aren't there or more. Just
Yeah.
kidding.
It's for-
It's
Four.
Anyway, we'll move on. It strikes me, there was a meeting, I think, of the agenda item came up on missions. I wasn't able to go, the vice chair, I think Jim
Yeah.
Stewart, I think Elena
Mhm.
Biaggi. Am I right?
No, I was at the original one, not on the second one. Yeah.
Okay. Do you all care to report on that?
Well, I mean, we offered to answer any questions, and the county commission had a number of questions, and my commissioner, the new one, I guess they're all pretty new, but
Mhm.
ours is a new one, Eric Olivas, and he expressed tremendous interest in our board and enlightened us about his temporary membership of the APD Review Board or whatever it was, which is no longer an oversight board, but a review board just like ours. Anyway, he was on that for some period of time, so he seems to have certain amount of expertise that he promotes in the area of law enforcement. At any rate, he said he told the commission that he wants to be the liaison person to our board, and he also said he was going to be coming to our meetings, which has not happened. We had in our annual report said that it would be a good idea to have a regular contact with the county commissioners, and that I think is good. I didn't say this to him, and I don't know whether the commission elected him to be our liaison person, but I don't necessarily think that we need to have a county commissioner attend every meeting.
Agreed.
I think that would have to be a change to the ordinance, right? If they wanted a.
No,
commissioner
an
to be
individual member can visit, as long as they don't do a
No, not
quorum.
visit, but be the liaison. That would have to be a change in the ordinance because the ordinance doesn't call for a commissioner liaison.
No, but there are other boards that do have them.
Well, I think
There's nothing there's nothing preventing them. Does that make sense?
yeah, I think it was just a matter of, is the commission going to authorize this one person or, specific
That's
other people? I know that Jim has been in regular touch with Commissioner Benson. And so I think it would be good to have at least, if we have specific liaisons, there should be more than one. And it would be good to have one from each party that's represented on the commission, I think, to get, some kind of possible different points of view. But at any rate, nobody from the commission is here today, so, and I have not, I got from Eric Olivas, I got a newsletter that apparently he's putting out now, but did you get that? Did you get that?
I did, but then I called his office and said I had some documentation on the origins of our board, my paper, and offered that and asked for a call back, but I haven't heard from him. But I wanted to talk with him about it, not just spend it. So it's something.
Yeah, Eric Olivas.
No, because
District 5.
Yes. I mean,
So
that's above our pay grade. If they want to accord one of their members some official status with us, that happens up there.
Right.
Your suggestions are certainly well taken, but need to be taken up there. If they want to apply one from each party, that's their.
I think every commissioner that was there that night, which was all of them, each one asked at least one question, and some of them several. So they had apparently read our annual report, which is good because, and Eric Olivas very quickly went through the, I think, 8 or 9 points that we had raised for the county commission and said, we can do this, we can't do this, da, 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 da. And I didn't respond to that because he was giving his take on what the responses should be. I don't necessarily agree with his analysis of all of it, but some of it was fine, that's in my opinion. So that's.
Mr. Wisber has his hand up.
Oh, okay.
Whenever
Michael,
he's
listen.
done. Mr. Wismer, unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now? I just had to unmute myself. In the spirit of disclosure, I also met with Commissioner Olivas. He is my representative here in the East Mountains. We talked a great deal about his experience on the oversight board in Albuquerque and some other issues associated with the East Mountains in particular. But I just wanted to disclose it, and I didn't represent the board in any way other than to sort of compare notes with him on the different types of boards, oversight versus advisory. And he's very receptive, and I think he will be a great asset to us going forward. But I just wanted to let everyone know that I have met with him, and I and we have established a good rapport, and I probably will meet with him again on an infrequent basis over a multitude of issues. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else?
You know, I would agree with Jim and his piece that he said last time. I think we're pretty squeaky clean. I mean, here, I think, you know, we have disclosed things that we don't, it's like, I knew him back in 48. And so I think we all have a pretty good standard of what that is, and I feel certainly comfortable in that. You know, no matter what it is, we can disclose, you know, however it is, so I feel real comfortable with that. But do you think we should have an actual conduct component written in? Is that what you're suggesting, or are you
No,
suggesting
I'm not,
us to make sure that?
I'm cautioning you because it's happened in so many, in some other departments. And this is, and then,
We're actually beyond that agenda item,
okay,
but I mean, that's fine. We'll continue with that. But, you know, I had asked if there was any report, from that commission meeting. Daniel, was there anything else to discuss with respect to your advice with respect to disclosure of potential conflicts?
I think we've hit every point.
Okay.
And we are subject to the county code of conduct. So,
Yes,
so even if we don't have something specifically in our SOARB code of conduct that Michael Wismer was good enough to draft, we still have that county code, which I think is on the county website, and it's probably worth reading for everybody on this board, just so you're specifically aware of what's on there, but I don't think it differs in any way from, significantly from what Michael Wismer drafted.
yes, and I can send everyone a copy.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be good.
Thank you for the report from the commission meeting, and it doesn't appear that you've indicated that there are any action items.
No, I think Jim raised some very good points also, because I made him come up there too. I wasn't planning to say anything. But he talked about the diversity of the views represented on this board and the communities, and you know, there's always room for improvement, and obviously 9 people aren't, you know, how diverse a set of views can there be, but I think it was a good point to make, and to let the commission know that that's what we're striving for, is to represent a range of views in the community.
Well, the way the commission set this up, five of us are geographically diverse, but 4 of us bring some subject matter expertise that should be of value in our discussion. So, and I just say that for board members to feel free to share that perspective if you bring it. You know, it appears that we're set up in a way that we value that. So.
And I think actually, is it 5 members of this board have law enforcement experience in one way or another, whether it's, you know, as a judge, as a firefighter, as sheriff's deputy, you know, and so forth. So I think that we certainly have a range of professions represented, well, and expertise.
With Diane and Bill Solomon. That's the standard. Okay.
And I should point out, you now are once again in a room with 2 Debbies and 2 Dianes.
Seen one, you seen them all. You have one, and I have only.
So if, I think we've covered any old business, we'll move to the new business. And
We did an update on the community component, the meeting venues on under old business. Number 6, suggestions for SOARB meeting venues. Under old business. I know.
Last month.
That's the minutes.
Yeah.
updates, if any, from SOARB subcommittees.
Oh, from any committees.
Yeah, that's number 8. So instead of
Oh.
listing them, we discussed
Yeah.
last time if anybody or any subcommittees have anything that they
Right.
want to share, give updates on,
Right,
that'd be their time, and that's kind of towards the end of the meeting.
okay.
So I think we have new
Perfect other
business.
than-
Mhm.
Right.
All right, so if we're gonna hit that at 8, Dr. Layden, do you have more on the,
Just a brief comment.
Okay.
You've seen this article. I read the news, all over the web. I read The Guardian, which is a British newspaper but has a US edition. And this article appeared in The Guardian, but the authors are from Searchlight, New Mexico, which is one of our local independent news sources. And what I discovered over the last year, we're getting a lot of national coverage in New Mexico in general. This is the third article about New Mexico in the last few weeks. There are other subjects, the acequias and Spanish in northern New Mexico and so on. But to me, it was significant that the Elijah Lucera case was mentioned nationally, and I believe it's well known among people who look into these matters throughout the US. Danette asked me if I wanted to.
I'm not sure people are able to identify that case just by its name, but we did have her sister. And
Elaine Maestas is the one who. When Danette asked, I asked to speak on the agenda because on March 31st, APD, I can send you these links if you want them.
yeah, because it opened up and I can't see that.
Yeah, it's an editorial. I gave my copies. I've got one copy. I'll send it around. Okay, there's an editorial on March 31st about APD and long overdue for common sense de-escalation rules. They now have a plaque on the wall at APD to recognize the de-escalation officer of the month. Okay, they're trying to change the culture. And we all know that every case an officer faces is unique and individual. But they're trying to create a new culture that values de-escalation. And the editorial also notes, and the journal covers all this all the time. I found at least 5 articles from David Diane and Will Hughes and Anderson. The editorial mentions that several of those shot by police last year, this is APD, had mental health problems. Now, back in the period of 2010 to 2014 at APD, 2 lengthy articles appeared, one in Rolling Stone, and the other, I think, was in either the Atlantic or the New Yorker about Albuquerque and the shootings that we had. So everybody knows now that people with mental health crises need special attention, and this happens to be an interest of mine. Diane, I was on a behavioral health committee for 4 years, the behavioral health department. So that was my interest. So I'm very glad to hear about developments in this area. Thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Could I make a comment? So the CIT or the de-escalation award that they give now, that's actually something that had been in the works when I was there at APD, because while APD follows the CIT program set forth by CIT International. And one of the recommendations from CIT International is that you do things like that so that you encourage and, you really show that that administration is looking at how well officers do on mental health calls. So I agree, they are, kind of advancing that area, and that's what I'd like to slowly bring to BCS. So your articles are about mobile crisis teams, and the only thing I have to note about that is I actually started this program with APD. So our administration had gone to Seattle to look at that program. Then they brought it here, and then we built a policy. And that's these photos here. I was a part of every single part of that, like initial onset of like our first team, and then we grew to 4 teams. So that is what I'm hoping to, kind of bring to BCSO, but it's important to note that a lot of that exists there. It's just now kind of fine tuning it because BCSO does have MCT, right? And they do have recognition on mental health. And they're completely delving in like into these diversionary programs. But I think it's important to know these things. I like that you're saying what you're saying that you pointed out on in the article, because it is important for officers to be recognized for kind of setting that tone at a mental health call. But that's why training is so fundamental and why incorporating those partners like within the curriculum, because officers tend to train these types of like certain like classes, but there are things that we can't and should not train, like, pharmaceuticals and PTSD and co-occurring disorders. So it's important that, and that's one of my goals, is to incorporate some more stakeholders.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just curious about how it's decided that a call is a mental health call versus, if you get a call that there's somebody with a machete or a gun or whatever, and whether or not that person has a mental health problem, there's still a danger. So how is that, when is it decided and how is it decided that there's a mental health call?
So I can speak to only APD right now because I'm still figuring out what's going on with ACSO, but I can tell you that dispatch receives similar training to the officers. What they get is a 3-day training on mental health. And they also get mental health first aid. So we train like things that we're training the officers to look for. We're asking the dispatchers to look for that also, but it's over the phone, right?
Right.
So it's just a little different. And the thing with dispatch is typically dispatchers have like 30 seconds to receive the information, to pump it out to the officer, and then slowly they get the information. So you're not wrong. I mean, it's hard to kind of navigate, is this a mental health call? But we do ask them, there are certain questions we want you to find out right away if it seems like someone is in crisis. And we try to align that with the same training that we're providing the officers and whoever else receives the training.
Yeah. I mean, my personal concern is just that law enforcement officers are asked to do too much in terms of diagnosing a mental health problem versus, a problem of somebody who has a gun or who presents a danger, whether or not there's a mental health problem. And in fact, I think there was an article in the Albuquerque Journal this morning, maybe, about diverting certain mental health, of course.
They're shifting from APD to the ACS.
But there's always the safety aspect, always first. So no matter what the call is, if you hear that it sounds like a violent encounter, you always have to address safety first. And we encourage to slow things down if you can. And in that period of slowing things down, you start to gather intelligence. And whether that be us communicating on our radios to dispatch and dispatch them to the caller, ask these questions if they haven't already asked that. But by far and large, our first priority is the safety of the person, of ourselves, and of the community that is present. So we may not find out until after an incident or a shooting or a violent encounter that that person was suffering from mental illness. Doesn't mean that we don't care that that was occurring, but we didn't have the time to address it.
Right.
We always have to address what's presented to us first, and it's always safety.
Yeah.
We're gonna do our best to identify those things. We're gonna do our best to identify certain locations and persons even before we get there. APD CIT had a very good database that showed these particular addresses we are already aware have persons with mental health concerns. So on approach, if that information is in the system, they would give that to us. That doesn't mean we're dealing with the person in that residence that has that concern, but that concern walking up. And maybe you are gonna deal with that person and you can address it appropriately. But there's always a concern for safety. And the situations are rapidly evolving. And maybe you only have 30 seconds period to deal with it. And maybe the outcome isn't what we hoped for, but we will always address that first and foremost.
Okay, thanks. Because I think sometimes the impression that's given to the public, to lay people, is that, you know, there's a squad of social workers or psychiatrists who are being sent out on law enforcement calls, and that's the appropriate way to deal with anyone with a mental health issue.
They're
But
being utilized as a tool
yeah,
and as a resource. After the scene is secure, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
after we go in and establish safety,
Mhm.
then we can ask for those additional resources. They might be responding with us and they can approach and apply it very quickly. Sometimes we might have to wait longer.
Mhm.
Maybe we might have to wait the whole time. That's why Diane's really gonna help our department get up to par with CIT training.
Yeah.
So that we can equip the officers to be able to deal with that firsthand
Mhm.
until maybe we do get a more professional medical clinician or somebody there to help address that situation. But we are always law enforcement first. But with that, we do want to use the resources that are appropriate for each person that we handle.
of course, but I think it's important for law enforcement to kind of, you know, make it clear that, as you said, this is a law enforcement, you know, safety issue first.
Right.
And, you know, the law enforcement officers are not expected to have the diagnostic capabilities that.
And I appreciate your support in that because we often get looked to be social workers, to be parents, to be doctors, to be nurses, to be, you know, all of these things. And really, we've been trained to be law enforcement to respond. But we're a unique population in which we're
Yeah.
willing to take on all of those
Mhm.
hats. But we are always there for the safety first. And a social worker isn't a replacement for a law enforcement officer.
Right.
And it's so rare is called, it's not multifaceted. I mean,
Right.
all of these things typically happen. But it's not like you just go out to a mental health call.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. in my
And it's the environment, as the person's involved, it's everything, it's the culture, it's maybe a language barrier.
Mhm.
You know, there's a lot that we have to work through.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have more time than others, but we are always training now to slow the situation down, to give us more time to identify that.
Thank you.
We always tell our people, you can only handle one call at a time.
Yeah.
There's no reason to rush through any call. Take your time.
So that is why it's so great that you all stay. Give us the practical side of some of these discussions. Really appreciate having that kind of information.
We never want the public to assume that we're replacing the law enforcement factor with a social worker. Because
Right.
there are two different functions. There's space in that environment for both of us, but
Mhm.
it's not a replacement.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else on that, Dr. Lee? That was your agenda.
Thank you so much.
Sure. All right. So, we are then at, item 8, and, that's the updates from any SOARB subcommittees. The updates for our subcommittees, didn't it? Do them off.
Well, we have, Mr. Montoya's, which is anything to do with the units, but I think he was waiting till the sheriff reorganized everything and then you guys were gonna come and talk about that when everything was settled. Mr. Montoya,
On that, David?
Yep, that's me.
so. And then we also have body camera, which I think, we got our answers, Republic, and we're kind of waiting for them to finish some contracts and new equipment to be in before, I mean, I guess we could probably answer any of those questions, right? The other thing, we always have policies. Mr. Stewart, do you have anything on policies, procedures, SOPs?
No, but it begs the question, who is, point of contact now? Policies.
SOP.
No, I can be.
I'm sorry. I call them policies. You guys call them this.
SOPs.
Yeah.
So it was Lori Carrillo.
She's still the point of contact,
Okay.
but
She can be, or if you have a specific question that you'd like to ask while we're here, or.
I do not. I just want, what I'd asked of her was that as policies are outdated, if I would be notified.
Okay.
And so we
I think that's still okay if.
went around and around about that.
Oh,
It was
were you
pretty
getting
frustrating. Yeah.
But then we.
But we have a new
do get
regime now, so.
Regular updates from
Well,
her.
And didn't the sheriff say something about everything coming through him?
Yes, he did. So there was, I had received a couple of questions and I took them to the sheriff and asked him how he would prefer for me to respond. And it wasn't that I was trying to not respond, it was just how he wanted to do it. So the question might go through the sheriff and then he would delegate to one of us to then be responsive for that, just so that he always knows what is going on within his department and with the board.
Right.
So I would suggest
Being a
emailing him.
military guy before I was a sheriff guy, we have a chain of
Yes,
command
sir.
and going right to the commander for stuff like, hey, could you tell me about this
Right.
policy? I'm a bit reluctant to do that.
Right. That was his request,
Mhm.
Okay,
his request, and then he would know he's not necessarily gonna be the one to respond.
I would hope.
And, but then he might, he's very active.
Mhm.
He then may disseminate to one of us to respond to you and then we'll take on the task.
Okay,
Especially because sometimes, even though everything that has to do with SOP goes to Chief Perio, because she says she's the lead person for the SOP committee. But it depends which side of the house the SOP that's being reviewed or updated or created falls under,
right.
either under Sheriff Williamson or I sit in that meeting. And then we all just.
And I sit on
Major, on all.
all of them.
So, but if it will be somebody that you want, every time we create a policy or update something, you'll want a copy, I think that's gonna be either one of us.
Okay, I speak Power DMS, and that was one of the questions I had for her is could you add me as
A user.
provide me access to Power DMS where I get an email saying, hey, this policy's been updated.
The only problem with that is that we have all of our department business on Power DMS, so it would be,
I know that,
yeah.
but there is a mechanism in there where it can be set up where it just shoots out, says, hey, Stuart, we updated the use of force policy. And I'd have the old policy and I'd have the new policy so I could compare and contrast. That's all I was trying to get. And I was getting very frustrated trying to get that. So
I don't know, I think
I have
that's a question to pose.
I have
for
a
the-
quick question that's kind of relevant to what we're all saying on the board. Is it the chief deputy get the memo about openness? Because to be real honest, when it came to this on patrol live thing, she was like the gatekeeper at the Great Wall of Manny. I really couldn't get any information from her. So I just want to make sure she's going to be as open as y'all are, because past history that I've had has been quite the opposite.
Is that Mr. Montoya?
Yes, I believe that's who that is.
Hi, Mr. Montoya, it's Major Anderson. It is the direction of the sheriff that we would be. So if you're having any concerns or any pushback on any one particular item or person, I would suggest that you do reach directly to the sheriff so that he can address it.
But not at the gym.
Not
I
at
don't want
the-
to. Look, I don't want to get pulled over or get a body cavity inspection or anything like that. Man,
It's where he's
She
trying
was-
to funnel
she was tough on us.
ideas
That's where
and
these
then
fights come in.
And he's still, trying to learn the office, like,
Yeah.
Mr. Cardenio said, we've been there for a solid 3 months now. But we've probably been working for about 6 weeks, because the
Yeah.
first 6 weeks is getting settled and figured
Yeah.
out. So,
Yeah.
yeah, Mr. Montoya, if you wouldn't mind, reaching out to the sheriff and, maybe expressing your concern, and he can get that addressed.
All right, hey, I appreciate it. I just want the information to flow. You know what I mean? That's my concern.
Again, we have no problem with openness.
all I've got is this.
But I can give you some updates about SOP if you want, because we just actually talked about it on Wednesday.
Well,
I,
let's continue and finish that agenda. That subcommittee can get with you on SOP.
yeah, actually, I think it was under Chief Carrillo who initiated the practice of telling us when updates were made, because prior to that, we were just told, no, you just have to like read all 200 or whatever it is, or 300 or 400 every
I'm still trying to
day to
get
see
through
if
it
there's
myself.
been a
Yeah.
change.
You're being
So
much more generous than I would.
I know.
The last email I got said that we met, we updated policy X through,
Right.
and it was like 120 policies. And I'm like, well,
So seeing, I
so I'm
looked at
supposed
that
to go
as,
through and read the previous edition and I couldn't get the previous edition because she wouldn't give it to me.
well, I know my experience was that updated, we knew where to look, and a lot of it was in response to suggestions that had been made in the previous year's annual report. So maybe I already had the prior versions, I don't know, but anyway, I personally did not experience the pushback that other people, I just wanted to.
I mean, it happened in the meeting. It happened in the meeting. We were talking on Patrol Live. That's a pushback. I saw that. I was a parent. I know I got the same military background.
Mr. Whisper.
So it's not imagined. You could watch the tape when we had that on
You
Patrol
heard
Live
about
discussion.
that At that meeting, well, yeah, that was, but as far as getting information on how it worked and getting copies of the contracts and that kind of thing, that there was no pushback on.
I just need all the folks that deal with us to be New Mexicans instead of New Mexiwon'ts.
Well, I think, that's part of her issue that day was that she felt ambushed. Because, and we certainly have a policy now that if we're gonna raise something at a meeting, we wanna put that out to the sheriff as soon as we know that that's gonna be raised, so that if there's a need to prepare a response or to research or whatever, that that nobody is feeling that they're just, walking into a situation that they had no reason to expect. So,
I'm as empathetic as the next guy, but that stuff was in the newspaper a week before. So it wasn't feeling ambushed when you walk in this meeting. It's being angry about something or having a bad day. It's not feeling ambushed. You knew it was coming down a week before. So I don't buy that.
Wrap this up.
okay.
Mr. Wismer had a question or comment.
Mr. Whisper, you have your hand up?
No, I actually just forgot to lower it from the last time. My apologies.
No apology needed. Let's move on. Danette, are there any other subcommittees that need?
Behavioral health and law enforcement issues, and I think we went over that as a prior meeting agenda. We also have symbology still on there. I don't know if we have anything new on that.
Have you seen those cars? Are they still in use?
That's the
There's a new one. There's a beautiful new recruiting vehicle that's got very patriotic symbols. It's gorgeous. I took a picture. I can send it around.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
I'll email it to you. That.
Okay, and I'll give it to everybody.
And
The last one is suggestions for SOARB meeting venues.
In this room, it's not being very friendly to us.
No, it doesn't really like us. Or it doesn't like me, I guess. I don't know.
So like,
There's supposed to be a screen.
Yeah, for
Zoom
the
or
Zoom guys, there's
whatever.
one screen.
Big screen doesn't work.
We're not messing around.
there they go.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna blame you guys, because usually when I'm in here for other meetings, it seems to work. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this room never works.
Okay.
But I tell you what, I sat in the council chambers for an hour
Right.
as they
Yeah.
tried to get that meeting online.
We started it twice, remember? We started it and then he restarted it again and did the Pledge of Allegiance.
It was
Yeah.
a long night.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
So maybe it is us. I don't know.
And then and I, we're supposed to be working on the jewel room of the International Library.
Who nobody knows who you are. Yes, we are.
Problems in trying to-
Yeah, so were there any other locations that
Yeah.
are under consideration?
Danette was saying about, because I was just saying with, as you experience, the community centers have a lot of hoops to jump through. Don't mind jumping through them, but they have a lot. Danette was saying that there's a number of county community places. And so I sent her a couple of recommendations. And so we're gonna look at what the availability is. I'm thinking maybe 2 to 3 meetings for the next year that we could book out far enough that we could advertise that we would be having them, far enough that we could count on the community organizations of that area, inviting the representatives and senators of that area so that they could be present as well, and doing those types of things. So we should have, a list probably, I think by next meeting, we should have some solid times of when we would be able to. One of the questions that came up, why we didn't want the venue at the sheriff's office certainly was having underserved communities feeling comfortable. One of the things that I mentioned was that every time I've gone to the sheriff's department, I have had to give my ID. And someone said, well, I don't think it's that way. It is that way, because when I went to the sheriff's office, I did give my driver's license. They gave me a visitor's pass, and then I had to sign in. So that protocol is still in place, which again is not one of the protocols that necessarily serve underserved communities, especially if they do or don't have an ID, or they don't feel. They didn't do that to you?
Well, I made an appointment with, with Chief Carrillo. So when I gave my name, they said, oh yeah, she's expecting you, and they gave me a name tag or a visitor tag.
He didn't
No, I
make,
had to turn mine in when I met with.
that makes me feel better.
I had to turn my license.
Yeah.
Like this,
Right.
like.
But this is, sorry,
I signed
this is for headquarters,
Right.
Yeah.
but not at the substation.
No, no, this was at headquarters because originally someone had offered for us to go up to the sheriff's department and have kind of a community meeting there. I was saying that was not conducive to underserved, misserved, disserved communities, because we had to give that. You didn't have to give an ID.
No, but maybe
He's
it
a-
was because I was expected, so.
I was
gave-
expected.
I was
So-
expecting too, but it didn't
Well,
happen.
I think maybe
You guys look
tacitly,
very threatening.
maybe tacitly decided was we will try to go out to underserved
Right.
communities, but we will not exclude the possibility of doing a meeting at one of the substations.
Right.
We've done neither.
The substations, you don't need an ID. I mean, the
Right.
substations, there is a public area
Yeah.
and a secure area in the back. But telling you for the East Mountain substation, at least, communities have meetings that we have a beautiful conference room there,
Mhm.
and
Well, specifically,
you just need to make it out like a reserve the room. And then when you go in, we just let you in. You just can't go in the secure areas, obviously.
Mhm.
That's the difference with headquarters. Headquarters is a secure building,
Right.
which is the SID. But if you're going to any substation, the South Valley,
Mhm.
you can just hold meetings at the South.
It still wouldn't be a conducive area, in my opinion, for underserved communities that may very much feel that it's not a safe place for communities that, like I said, the underserved communities. That's not necessarily, and people feel differently depending on the culture and who they are, and what experience they've had working with law enforcement. But we're working on having that and still having, the presence of, the sheriff's department just in a different venue, and being able to publicize it so that the community would be aware and could come, and doing those things so that, and it's still a work in progress, so that.
I think we have to thank you for keeping us attuned to that. At the same time, I think we have to challenge you to help us get representatives of that community to this meeting,
Yep.
whether it's
Right.
wherever it is, we need to connect with those folks.
And maybe destigmatize the fact that you can come to a substation.
Mhm. Or maybe you do one in a community center and then the following time
Whatever it
do
is,
one
I
at the
think that
substation.
we need help from our community participants to destigmatize those types of situations,
And I
to
think,
encourage them to come out to.
right, and I think
That
that's.
was my
the
job
piece.
when I was the
Yeah.
Spanish speaker PIO.
Right.
I would go to events with the Mexican consulate
Mhm.
to go and speak to them and say, we're not immigration. We don't care
Mhm.
like what your immigration status is. We just want the crime to be reported so we can actually help you.
Right.
But I agree with you. It takes, like, working so closely with that,
Mhm.
it takes a lot of education. And unfortunately, we kind of went backwards in the last few years that we
Right.
need to like get back to it. But
Mhm.
it's possible.
I think it's possible, and I have hope that we can be able to do that and hear the voices. And I think more when we support those voices who have been silenced, the more that people will start to realize that there is a venue for you to be heard, and that you're not to be punished or not to have fear. But I think that has a long way to go, because of the communities have often had poor experiences, and we're just now coming out of that cloud to be able to offer some more positive.
I've been having really good reception. I give speeches to immigrant communities
Mhm.
at it's a church on Broadway in San Jose.
Mhm.
So I give speeches there, and
Right.
We started with like 20,
Right.
and now the place is packed, because everybody just
Great.
wants to go and be like, oh,
So
it's
that's
actually.
San Jose, Superior
Yeah.
Church.
Uh-huh. And so, I mean, those
I
are
don't think
the
we can be there,
possibilities.
Can we meet at?
I was kind of.
That was a good trick question, though.
But we'll get there, especially if they see us working together.
I think so.
That's what they need, and I think
Yeah.
it'll happen.
So, I mean.
Yeah, and this is David, I agree, I don't think the environment is right. I mean, the last, until January, and I think that maybe it's time to start building some bridges over the next 3 months and destigmatize some of this attitude that's been prevalent for the last 3 or 4 years. But I could see where we're coming from on terms of people of color not wanting to feeling comfortable going to substations or the headquarters. But I think it's time to start building some bridges.
So, I mean, I'd be happy to have you as part of that as we look at venues. You're more than welcome to be a part of that, and then we can, put that forth and utilize.
If it means I got to
all
work
of
with
our
you,
connections. Yes.
if it means I got to work with you, I'm all in. That's where I'm at on that.
All right, thank you. That has been on our. Appreciate, getting out of this space. Where it takes us immediately, ultimately, we want a place that's welcoming both the agency that we're focused on, the sheriff's office, as well as the public we all serve. So as you know, we keep that in mind. Appreciate it. Any other subcommittee information reports to come before this meeting?
Those are the only active ones I have so far, so.
Okay.
I think just real quickly on the specialized units, as these things start getting spun up and for the undersheriffs, whether it's retail crime or auto theft, or even this new thing that we're gonna do with the drones, as those units come online and there's some procedures and who's who in the zoo, we'd love to share with the public what they're going to do and what the efforts are behind those specialized units as they come online. So I'll be the contact for that.
And David, we'd all love to go up in the drone.
I used to jump out of airplanes for a living. You won't get me to do that anymore.
So our next meeting is scheduled for the 14th of May.
Well, sorry. The 14th is a Sunday, but if anybody wants to meet on a Sunday,
Okay, so that's
Wednesday?
yeah.
Yeah.
So it is
it's
fine.
12.
It's the 12th is the Friday, the second Friday of May.
I thought it might be a good idea, just after each meeting, if Danette could send to her huge list of people involved with this board, just when and where the next meeting is, because sometimes we change it and someone's not here and then they don't find out till the last minute. So if we could just do that. And I know you have a whole list of people at the sheriff's office and other venues that you send announcements to. I think it would just be helpful.
I usually send it just when it's published, just because that's when it goes out to the media.
Next meeting is here. Correct.
As far as we know, yes. It could be on the 7th floor, I'll let you know.
I used to wave that in front of us.
It was.
It's amazing.
Please, you can confirm, let's do that and publish the post.
Yeah, I have to get with IT and see where they are with their.
You wanna have it at the East Substation? It's a beautiful company. It's beautiful up in these mountains. This year.
Fine, go have a picnic.
It's shorter drive for me too.
Have we approved in that March minutes yet?
Where's
No,
that?
I don't think so. I think we
On
delayed consideration.
6 and 337 South 14.
Oh,
The fire
okay, so
station there?
like To Harris?
Yes.
Okay.
To hear us at it?
So
It's
we'll
nice.
pull off the we'll pull off the table and bring up, March minute, approval.
Oh,
Is there a motion?
I have a question.
So let's get the motion on the floor first. Is there a motion to approve? Well, I guess not. Go ahead, Dr. Layden.
Under, at the bottom, in the paragraph strongin, in line 1, 2, 3, 4, it says conversion instead of conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other corrections, additions, deletions? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I so moved.
Second? Any opposition? By acclamation, then the minutes stand approved. The motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second,
Second.
anyone ready? We're adjourned.
Not sure.
Goodbye, everyone.